Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hey, it's interesting talking about conflict resolution in a conference that has so many other topics in a way related to it. You know, in short, what Laura had said, what Andy had said, what the speakers this afternoon are going to be talking about, the more you embrace and internalize what they say, the less you'll need this. However, you will still need it. The reason being is project management brings change. Change brings conflict. Another thing that I'll say is this is a twofer for you today. The reason is because, you know, why do people learn about conflict resolution, for example, at a conference like this? You don't have any conflict in any of your projects or anything, do you? Everybody gets along, everybody does what you want, right? Everybody's looking at me like, oh my God, no. But you know what? When you learn conflict resolution here, or influence or other things, when you step out of the office and move home, it works there too. So it's a work skill that becomes a life skill, because at the end of the day, people are people. Now, what I'd like to talk about first here is, you know, what's the return on investment about learning about this stuff, about conflict resolution? So what I'd like everybody to do is take a moment and think about this for yourself. How much of your work time is spent either in direct conflict with other people or having to clean up the mess and deal with conflict of other people, whether it be your team members, your stakeholders, or others related to your project? Just sort of the percentage on an average day, give or take. I'll give you a moment to write this out and think about it. So what kind of numbers are you coming up with? What percentage of your day? You know, on an average day, give or take. 10%? More? Less? 45%? Others? 110? I hear 110. Do we hear 115? 115 going once, going twice? No, but so the way to look at whatever number you have come up with here is this is your return on investment of minimizing conflict within your team and within your stakeholders and others. In addition to making your day a little bit nicer, what it also does is that 20%, or I'll just pick 10%, the low end of your time, that you're spending trying to get people to get along, if you can improve that through the techniques that you learn here or other places related to conflict resolution, then that's 10% of your day back, where you could be doing other things. Other important things like taking a longer lunch, checking your Facebook, etc. No, but think about it. That's the benefit of this from a time management perspective, beyond all the other advantages or obvious advantages related to conflict resolution. And now I know which button to press, so I'm going to roll here. Now, there are two types of conflict. The first type is healthy conflict. I am huge on diversity within projects. And I'm going to take diversity with a small d rather than a large d, meaning it's difference in thoughts. Someone who has a degree in computer science, someone who has a degree in liberal arts, someone who's been with your company for 25 years, someone who was hired 3 weeks ago from a competitor, someone who's a project manager, and dare I say, someone who's not. Someone from the business side, someone from the technical side. If you can bring all of these people together related to your projects, it creates healthy conflict. You ever have a brainstorming session where people say, no, do it that way. No, we got to do it this way. And you come up with a really great answer and a great solution that no one could have got if they did it separately or individually. My mother had an expression, 2 heads are better than one. That's what creative conflict allows. Now, this is not the kind of conflict that you want to minimize, but in its essence, it is conflict. If this is healthy conflict, guess what kind of conflict you're going to want to stop? Unhealthy conflict. Now, this is actually what we'll be talking about for the next hour. What this is it the denial that the problem exists. It's, you know, just giving up. You ever say, oh, you know, I'm just not even going to deal with this. Whatever happens will just happen? That's avoidance. Generally speaking, not a good thing either. You know, just getting angry and playing the blame game. In fact, Andy, where are Andy and Laura? Because they did great stuff. Many of the things that Andy mentioned this morning, wasn't he good, by the way? Wasn't he great? Is, you know, the idea of proper communicating, or one person says this, another one says that, or in the little exercise that he did, is that it is so important if you get angry, and we're going to talk about a technique about this later, that what happens if you do get angry? It only hurts your project. Now, these are the 5 things. This is work by Christopher Moore. I'd like everybody to write these down because I'm going to be asking you for shout-outs very soon related to which ones of these. I like to refer to these as the root cause of all conflicts. I'll give you some examples. Data. That's where I know something and you don't. Imagine that I was your manager. Who should I pick on? Who should I pick on? What's your name? Yes, you. I'm sorry, April? Okay, so let's say that April works for me, okay? And you know what? Let's say I work for April. How's that? I work for April and I keep bugging her about, oh, I really want to have a project like this. I really want to have a project like this. And a project like this comes up and April doesn't give it to me. Am I going to be mad? Yes. Maybe the reason she didn't give me this project, and maybe I would confront her on it and say, you know I want to do this kind of project. Why didn't you let me? Maybe she knows that a much cooler and bigger project related to that same topic is coming in a month, but it's corporate confidential and she can't tell me yet. These are the kind of problems called by data. The next one is interest. Is that there are things that I want and you want. Have you ever argued with another project manager over resources? Over, hey, I want Joe as my business analyst. No, you can't have him. I need him because he really does well. It could be people. It could be money. It could be attention. It could be visibility of senior management. It could be all of those things. Or values. Now, by values, I don't mean one person has good values and one person has bad values, but it could be how they feel about risk. Let's say I try to avoid risk. So what happens when it comes to a fixed price contract or a time and materials contract? If I totally avoid risk, which one am I probably going to want? Fixed. I'd rather spend a little bit more money up front and if anything goes wrong, you know, I want somebody else to worry about it. How about if someone is willing to take on more risk to save the company potentially more money? Then what would you go with? Time and materials. Because if the vendor is just time and materials, then generally speaking will be willing to give you a lower rate because they're not taking on the risk of overrun. So let's say that you and I have risk avoidance, you're willing to take on more risk. There's no right or wrong here, they're just different. So we fight back and forth over it based on our values and our specific feelings about risk. That's what that one is. Now, probably what we might come up with is a solution, back to my mother, the 2 heads are better than one thing. God, I do sound like my mother when I say that. But anyway, is that we may end up with, you know what, this part of the project is not risky at all. It's using existing technologies or whatever it is. So let's do that on a time and materials where we can save some money, but we know this part of it is more difficult, so we'll do that one in a fixed contract. Neither one of us would have come up with that solution ourselves. But anyway, that's what value is, relationship. At the end of the day, people are people. Wouldn't our jobs be much easier if human beings came with user manuals? They don't. So there'll be an interesting story. I'll tell you about that one in a little bit. And the last one, structural. What that is it's, you know, this person's in this project, in this part of the company, this person's in that part of the company, they don't get along. Just imagine that you're automating something in a department to make it more efficient. And you go into that department and you said, great news, I'm automating your department. That's my project. And when I'm done automating it, it's going to be so efficient, we won't need you anymore. Can we meet on how I can help implement this project? Right? Anyone ever implement a project of that type where they know it's going to be productivity improvement? And what's the standard thing you say? It's that we'll take this off your plate so you can do other things, which 99% is the case. But you can get a lot of pushback. What that is structural. Your job is to make the department more efficient. Their job is to stay employed. And one thing I've learned over the years is it's very, very hard for a person to understand a concept that reduces their paycheck. Now, everyone write these down, because again, we're going to be talking about them very, very shortly. Beginning with our next slide. Have you heard risk brings opportunity? Risk brings opportunity. I'd like to slightly change that to here and say conflict can bring opportunity. And why is that? Well, let's look at data. Is that it can bring greater understanding. I've read the analysis and I came up with this result. You came up with the analysis and came up with that result. Like there's that old joke about the statistician. Did you hear about the statistician who drowned in a lake that on average was only 2 feet deep? It's those kind of things. People can correctly so analyze different data from different perspectives. So what is that if now I explain to you how I analyze the data and you tell me how you analyze the data, what do we get between us? A better understanding of the data. Next, interest. It drives innovation. Well, if I want it this way and you want it that way, back to that idea of I want to automate your department and you want to keep your job, then are there greater analytics? What are the other things that you can do if you have that data working for you? You know what? When they said that when they first allowed calculators to go into schools, they said, well, kids won't know anything about math anymore. What it ultimately did is it allowed them to do more advanced mathematics beyond the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division into statistics, into other things, because they weren't mired down in the time that it takes to do the manual mathematical computation. Value is better decision making, as mentioned earlier. Structural. What that does is relationship. What that does is brings transparency. If you and I are having an issue, and I say, this is how I feel about it, this is how you feel about it, and we sort of get along a little better. In fact, I think Andy said it in his thing this morning, is what do you want to do with it if there's someone you're really not getting along with? Have lunch with him or her. Get to know them a little bit. In fact, do you know the best time to get to know someone? Before you have a conflict with them. It sounds funny, but think about this. What does that mean to you? When you take on a project and you think of the potential people, oh my God, it's going to be awful working with him or it's going to be awful working with her, strategically get to know them ahead of time. I don't mean go out for drinks on a Saturday night, but grab lunch, have a cup of coffee, get to know them a little bit, because then when you ultimately do have a conflict with them, if there's somewhat of a business trusted relationship, it will be easier for you to solve these conflicts. And then lastly, structural. A lot of times, particularly in siloed organizations, what happens is that the communication flows down, but it doesn't flow across. Now, has anyone heard of this, the conflict spiral? Okay, let me ask now, has anyone ever happened to this? Imagine this scenario. Yes, I'm the project manager. You said you were going to have that analysis done for us. Where is it? That's not what you asked me for. I did some analysis, but it wasn't what you were but it doesn't seem to be what you were looking for. I told you I needed it this way. You know what? Now that we're going down the spiral. You know what? Not only didn't you do the analysis right, but I really don't like the way that you wrote up the other numbers that I was asking for you. Oh yeah, well, you know what? You project managers are all the same. I've gotten general now, right? You know, you with your reports and your status and the impact thing, which by the way was very good, wasn't it? You know, is that, you know, why can't we just get our work done? So what happens is that the spiral is spinning down. It used to be you just wanted your reports. Now you want the person fired. You want to do them harm. Now it's about you winning and them losing. When you see that happen, you see it between people, you see it between companies, you see it between countries. When you see that spiral starting to spin down, the first thing you need to do is recognize it, and then use the other stuff we're going to be talking about to move it back up. Making sense? How am I going? Too fast, too slow? Too loud, too soft? Is the coffee too hot, too cold? All right, good. Now, here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move it directly into the business place. There are places, there are drivers of organizational conflict. Now, from a project management perspective, basically it's related to stakeholders. And I'm going to talk about stakeholders from two different perspectives, you know, from a PM component. There's the people who during the length of the project, you know, during its duration, while the project is going on, people that can cause you pleasure or pain as the project manager. It could be the compliance organization if you're in a regulated industry. It could be the people holding the money. It could be the person from the example this morning who you have to, from marketing, who you have to get to sign the forms. So anyone who can cause you pleasure or pain. The other side of the stakeholders are anyone is once the project is completed and implemented, the people on which you're inflicting pleasure or pain. You roll out a new process. Initially, it's where's the budget? How do I get approval? How do I get that thing? And then you got to roll it out to the 1,000 people on the manufacturing floor. Now you're giving them pleasure or pain. So it's either side of these. So that's how I want you to view these. And as we go through these organizational pieces, what I want you to do is just shout out which of those 5 things that we talked about here relates to each of the cases that I'm going to talk about. The first one, conflicting goals, job roles that are different, competing for rewards, different hidden or personal agendas. Which of those 5 have to do with this? Values? Absolutely. People are thinking about other things. Relationships? Interests? So these are the root causes of this particular type of conflict. So what do we do as project managers when we find a root cause? We brainstorm and try to come up with ways to fix it. So if you can come up with the particular reasons, there's a negotiation trick, in fact we're going to see a little bit of it later, where you're interested in people's interests rather than their positions. Those are the things you have to work on when someone comes up with this. Next one, conflicting personalities, personal history, things along that line. Relationships. I'm going to give you an example of this that happened to me, I don't know, 25, maybe a little more of that. I was in IT. I went up through the IT ranks. And I was at a company, and my job was basically in charge of the automation for this particular department. And just, you know, internal organization changes, things moved around. So instead of me working for this department, now I'm providing the automation for this department. Sort of sales versus marketing versus manufacturing, that kind of thing. And the person, as it was over here, the person whose department I'm providing the technology for is my dotted line manager. So you're sort of with me on that structure? From the second I met this person who was my new dotted line manager, basically the person who would be doing my performance review next year, from the second that she met me, I wouldn't say hate was a strong enough word. It was somewhere south of disdain. And I mean, I'm like, first time I met her, I mean, I could, you meet someone and you know, your shoulders get tight. And, I didn't know why, but I was mentally writing my resume in my head. You know, as a kid, we just bought our first house. I'm very nervous about this. I need this job. Couple of weeks go by, I try to do all the right things. I met the people in my new staff over here and talked to the business users and, sent an email over that says, yes, I've done all this due diligence. I think that there's great things that you can do for your department, and really like wordsmithed it because, again, I'm really nervous about my job at this point. She's not communicated with me during those 2 weeks. And I met this email, I get an email back, that sounds great, keep it up. All right, that was it. So about a couple of days after that, I sheepishly walked into her office, and as soon as I walk in, she looks up. You can see the, like the body language. And I said to her, apparently, it seems to me that we got off on the wrong foot. Whatever I did, it seems that I inadvertently, upset you. Whatever I did, it was by accident. Please accept my apology. Now, keep in mind, I'm like fighting for my job right now. This was not a comfortable thing for me. And she looks down, she goes, just like that, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm done. She looks up, she says, actually, I owe you an apology. I said, why is that? She says, have you felt the tension that every time I look up at you, and I said, yes, and whatever I did, I'm sorry. She says, no. Actually, you look exactly like my ex-husband. Which broke the tension. She says, I'll make a deal with you. At this point, I'm thinking, maybe I actually do have a job. She says, I'll make a deal with you. I said, sure, what? She says, I'll promise not to think of my ex-husband when I look at you. And if we're arguing over something and I call you Jeff, you know why. People are people. This stuff just happens. In that case, through blind, dumb luck, I was able to break it, but you know what? If I didn't confront it that day, and I loved the company I was at, what do they say? People join companies and leave managers? I might have left because I could not be without a job, and I truly felt my days were numbered there. When at the end of the day, it really had nothing to do with me, except that I looked like Jeff. There's a lot of things I could change, but sort of my mug I couldn't. All right, the next one. Limited resources. We're fighting over budget dollars, things like that. Which one of those is it? Interests. Exactly. So if you can isolate this and say, all right, if you're fighting over departmental budgets, then you work with the other person to say, all right, it's our manager said between the two of us, we each have 10 grand on our project, 10 grand each. How are we going to split this up? That's actually called a distributive negotiation, where if I get 15, you get 5, and vice versa. So maybe we come out with a way together working to try to say, hey, we both need to bring in a BA, but we only need them half-time. So how about we fund the BA together, split it between our projects, which effectively turns the 20 grand we got into 30 grand. So that's what this one is. How about this next one? Work ethic, work-life balance, the way different offices work, task prioritization. Where does that fall under those 5 potential root causes? Values? Could also be structural a little bit. So again, what you're doing now is you're beginning to analyze underneath. So for example, I'm going to give you an example on work-life balance that actually was just a communication issue. I had a friend working for a company in Boston, and I was a PM, and his software development staff was in Florida somewhere. I forget exactly. I think it was Clearwater, but don't hold me to it. And the people from Boston, we're in early, and we're calling them at, 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Nobody's answering the phone. And we're thinking, boy, what slackers. They're like rolling in at 9:45 to work. Can you believe it? How are we going to get any work out of them? All right, they worked from like 10 to 7-ish. That was their work day. Worked just as hard and just as much as us, but the day was shifted and we didn't know it. So they're calling us like 5:05. And they're thinking of they're thinking of my friend and the people in Boston saying, what is it? These guys got a time clock? Like I'm going to date myself here, like Fred Flintstone. The clock goes out, everyone slides off the back of the dinosaur and goes home. And it caused some real conflict within the teams till they realized that the work shifts were like this. And they always then, once they figured that out, they had meetings from 10 to 5. And anything before that was just Boston stuff. Anything after that was Clearwater stuff, unless previously described. So some of these things where it seemed it was a work-life balance, it was just really related to problems with the two teams communicating. Next one, difference in methodology. Anyone hear of this cool new thing called Agile? No? Seriously? Just having fun. But how many people or how many times have you seen the corporate people are using waterfall? For those of you, how many of you in there sort of the IT space? So this will be most applicable for you. With the corporate folks, corporate IT is using waterfall and this big paper-based methodology. You know, and the people on the new stuff or in the divisions are using Agile. Look at it as basically a linear type methodology versus one that's looser but more fluent and, well, an Agile. How do the two of them talk? Or other things regarding vested interests in specific technologies or processes. You know, one thing that's going on is like Caterpillar. You know, they make the backhoes and stuff like that. They've gotten to be a very, very automated company within their equipment. It's a process actually called digital transformation, where in all of their tractors, they have little sensors in it that will tell the people who own the tractors when preventive maintenance is needed on different parts of the equipment. Why? Because, well, if you're about to be harvesting your field, the last thing you want is your harvester breaking the day before, you know, harvest season. But what also does it do for Caterpillar? Is it gets people doing preventive maintenance sooner. It's the same reason that when you get your oil changed, you know, they put that little sticker up in the corner of your car. Why do they do that? So they remind you when to change your oil. I don't know if they did, with me, if they didn't put that sticker up there, I got a mind like a steel trap. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. All right, if they don't have that little number up there, I'm not going to have a clue when that was done, in which case they lose money because I haven't changed my oil. I mean, if let's say instead of 5,000 miles, I go 10,000 miles without changing my oil, you think I'm going to tell them to change it twice because I missed one? No. But anyway, imagine the cultural change internally when they're rolling out how the tractors are built to include all these new sensors. These are the kind of things you run into from methodology. Or how about geographic divide? Anyone working with onshore or offshore resources that are either down the street, across the country, around the world? There's the potential for the he said, she said stuff. They don't understand it. Oh, why do I have to have meetings at 9:30 at night so my group in India can have it at 9 in the morning? You know, these things that come out, you know, it could be just distance and the way people work. It could be over sports. You know, I was talking with someone before, you know, imagine a team in Michigan and a team in Ohio, and they both love football. You know, is that the two colleges don't get along too well? You know, funny stuff like that. I was on a team, I was working on a team in Boston that had a team in LA, and it was when the Celtics and the Lakers were head-to-head, and a bet was made before a big game between a couple of people, and it started an argument between the two, and it actually destroyed the relationship between the two offices. You know, the manager of both teams came in and say, here's what I'm going to do. Now you only follow football. But that was an issue caused by divide, or also negotiation. Negotiation is done differently in different countries. These are things that can cause conflicts. Now, which of these? Which one does this fall under from our 5 root causes? I heard someone say it. Structural. So if you can figure out what the structural issue is, it can help you fix it. And now this one, microcultures. Let me ask you a question. Are the sales department in your company and the accounting department, they have the same flamboyant nature, right? They're exactly the same. The engineers and customer service, human resources and marketing, right? All those people act exactly the same in their microcosms, right? No. It's funny, when I say stuff like that, I get people looking at me, really? They're so different. But anyway, this is why. Is that this is what kind of conflict? Relationship? Structural? So if you can figure out that it's relationship, say that the accounting group and the sales group, they're fighting head to head. What's one of the things that you can do if they're both related to your project? You're doing an accounting system for the marketing people. Bring them all in a room for lunch. Get them to know each other a little bit. Because once you know people a little better, it's easier to solve conflicts. Actually, if you know them better, not only is it conflict resolution, it's negotiation, it's influence, it's selling, it's difficult conversations. Get people talking, back to sort of what was said in the opening by Andy, and it's much easier to solve these kind of problems. Okay, now let's move. We've talked about the what, right? What is conflict? It's these 5 kinds of things. And then we talked about the why. Now let's talk about some stuff that will help you fix it. Sound like a plan? Good, because if you said no, we would have had a conflict and we would have had to work it out. First thing, recognize that a conflict exists. You ever have somebody, you're in a meeting and they yell at you and you say, well, why are you, and you didn't realize they'd been mad at you all this time? Or conflicts between the people on your teams. As the project manager, there's no politics within the project from you down. Why? Because all of the politics are basically to play up to you. You get that with managers, directors, C-suite, CEOs. Is all of the politics below them, unless you really pay attention, you can't see it. So the first thing you need to do to solve conflict is to recognize that it's happening. It sounds like a simple thing, but you really need to pay attention to it. Anyone take classes on emotional intelligence or any of that kind of stuff? The more of that you have related to your team and others, the easier it will be for you to identify it. Because if you can't fix something that you don't know needs fixing. Now, this one is the best time to get to know someone is before you have a conflict with them. I alluded to that earlier, and about use that to your strategic benefit. I'm going to tell you another way that this works. Is there anyone that just by a show of hands, has anyone ever worked with someone that they've never met in person or through video, but it's been all emails and voice, and maybe voice over the course of days, months, years? Okay, for those who have your hand up, have you ever then met that person just serendipitously at a conference, or they happen to be, come to your office for other things, and you go, oh, it's great to put the name with the face. Has anyone ever happened to that? Okay, now let me ask you a question to those who just put your hands up. Even though you just met them in person for like 20 minutes, from that time forward, didn't the relationship with that person just feel a little bit closer, a little bit more trusting, and a little bit different? That's what this says. So what I'd suggest that you do in this case is anyone who has people like that, just call them up and say, hey, you know what, why don't we meet on Skype for once? We've been working for years, it'd be nice to put a name to a face. Or if you're at another office, at some other physical location, take note of all the people that you interface with or will be working with at that other office and just do a walk around. 2 minutes, hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm Eric from, corporate. I know we're going to be working on a project in a couple of months, nice to meet you. Just that simple connection will have an enormous benefit when it comes time for conflict, because it's harder to argue with somebody that you've sort of met and and you got a decent relationship with. Now, this one is very, very key. I love this one. Generally speaking, people are not against you, they're for themselves. Have you ever had somebody in a project who just blocked your way? They wouldn't sign the forms, they wouldn't let you talk to the people on their team, they wouldn't give you the requirements you wanted. And you say, well, what am I doing wrong? Why doesn't this person like me? The truth is, in most cases, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with that there's something out there related to your project that they think is going to hurt them personally. You heard of WIFM, WIIFM, what's in it for me? This is the sort of other side of that coin. So here, what you want to do, if you realize this, and you don't say, well, why won't this person sign it? And you say, what is it that is causing this person to not want to sign it? Then you can help work it out for them. Everyone say, I'm too busy to work on I don't have time to work on your project. They're there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They have plenty of time. It's not a time issue, it's a prioritization issue. If they thought what you were doing was important to them, they would find the time to do it. I'm sure if you walked in their office and said, hey, could you give me a hand for a minute? I got a wheelbarrow of money out here that I want to bring into the building. I'll split it with you if you'll hold the other side of the wheelbarrow. They would find time. So that's a good excuse by using prioritization, or by using time as an issue. Next, these are the interpersonal ground rules. We teach these to our kids all the time. Anyone ever say, don't be mean to your brother or your sister? Look at some of the others that are here. Focus on the present. Well, 5 years ago when you did this. Well, it isn't 5 years ago, it's today. Oh, I won't say which table it come from, but we had someone at one of the tables up there going, yeah. Avoiding acquisitions. That too, but accusations. Yeah. Look at this list. A biggest one on here too is remaining calm. We'll talk about that one later. If you can remain calm, then you know what that brings to you? That brings to you great respect. Because, 95% of what we do in our job is, the standard stuff. It's the 5% when things go wrong, when an important decision has to be made, when there's a big change of some type. It's how you deal during that 5% that makes or breaks your reputation at the company. Like, wow, this awful thing happened, and, Amy was able to fix it. That will be remembered for years. So follow these rules, because if you don't, among other things, what will happen is it will start that spiral that we talked about of going from bad to worse. Next, this is my favorite acronym. Can anybody know why? It's my first name. It's actually a real acronym, too. Somebody made it up and used it as a joke to me, and I liked it so much, with their permission, I've taken it on. But what this means is emotional response inhibits control. Have you ever walked out of a meeting and said, man, I know I shouldn't have said that, but I just couldn't help myself. I was really mad. Anybody else do that? Okay, did anyone watch was it the Oscars Sunday night, or any of those type shows where you get someone up there and obviously they're brilliant, they just won an Oscar or a Golden Globe or whatever one of those are, and they get up there and they go, oh, where did I put my speech? Oh, it's here. Oh, I need my glasses to read it. Where are they? Oh, they're on my face. All right, brilliant people acting maybe not at their best. They also, what happened was their emotional response inhibited their control. But instead of being mad, they were excited, they were nervous, and they were surprised. You ever see somebody do it like that? Like they're like, oh, I don't know what to do now. And then they go back and they sit down. Do you think they say to their friends, well, that went well? No. So what I'm going to say to you here is that if it's through conflict, or if you have to get up and present, or whatever it is you're doing, and you're really nervous or you're really mad, humans can deal with anything if they know it's short-lived. When you go to the dentist to get a filling or a root canal or any of that, do you say to the dentist, could you do that a little slower? No, what do you say? Or what do you think? You can't say anything, he has his hands in your mouth. But what are you thinking? Get this done already. But you could live with it, live with the pain and the grossness of it for 30 minutes because it's a 30-minute thing. Humans can deal well with issues that they know are time-bound. A meeting, a situation is time-bound. So say to yourself, you know what, I'm really mad, but think of Eric and say, I'm not going to let the emotional response inhibit my control. I'm going to be really calm. I'm going to do what's good for me and the project and the company and my stakeholders. And then on the way home when I go to the gym, I'll spend an extra 10 minutes on the treadmill or hit the punching bag for another 10 minutes. This is enormously valuable in conflict. Why? Because it keeps you calm, which ties back to the ground rules that, in fact, we talked about in the next. This next one, vase. You ever have someone come in your office yelling at you? I can't believe blah, blah, blah. What do? You ever try interrupting someone in the middle of an emotional rant? Does it get better? No, it gets worse. Let them vent. What happens if you let it vent? Yeah, anyone ever done that? You know, you get on the phone because you're really mad at Verizon and you're yelling at them. Then you feel better. Anyone a long-distance athlete, long bike rides, marathoner, any of that? Okay, so you'll know they have what they call a runner's high, where the endorphins kick in, and then all is well with the world. Right? If you're yelling and screaming at somebody for 5 minutes, that takes a lot of work. The endorphins will kick in. So let somebody vent, then acknowledge that they have an issue, solve it, and then educate them on how to not happen again. I'll give you a brief example of this. Imagine, I'll pick on Verizon again. You were up in northern Michigan. I hope I have my geography right. I'm going to pick on Vermont because I'm from New England, so I'm sure that touches Canada. You go on northern Vermont on vacation, and all of a sudden you get your Verizon cell phone bill, and it has $500 in global charges from Canada. So would you call Verizon, or would you just pay the bill? Call Verizon. Will you be in a really good mood? Like, oh, hey, you're not going to believe what happened to me, Mr. Sales Rep. No. You're going to be, I can't believe it. Don't you guys own a world map? Last time I looked, Vermont was part of the U.S., blah, blah, blah. And if you remember, we had a presidential candidate from there, blah, blah, blah. And the person on the other end just sits, and, when you're yelling at the customer service people on the phone, you know what they're doing? Playing solitaire on their computer, waiting for you to finish. But then when you're done, they'll write down a number 2. They'll say, wow, if I got $500 extra on my bill, I'd be pissed too. Let me look. And they'll say, oh, you were right up near the Canadian border, weren't you? Yes, I was. And it says, all right, well, you know what? It vacillates, depending on which mountain you were in front of, you either got a U.S. or Canadian tower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all those charges off because it's obvious you were in the U.S. All right, that's the third one. That's solve. And then educate. Hey, next time you're up there on vacation, if you see a little G with a circle around it, that means global roaming. Just give us a call. We'll take it off your bill so you won't have to call us back at a later time. So remember this. VACE. It's enormously valuable process when someone comes in your office all mad. How are we doing? These making sense to folks? Now, how and what questions? This was really interesting. I was doing a webinar on this from actually a home office. It was an evening meeting. And my wife happened to hear it. And she came in after I finished. I was talking about what and why questions. Oh, actually, what, why. There are other type questions that come into it. And she's laughing. I said, well, why are you laughing? She took early retirement, and now she's an artist she teaches art classes. But she was an OT in an elementary school, helping kids as needed with special needs. And she said when kids would have temper tantrums, what they were clinically taught to do was ask them how, what, why type questions. Because what it did, it moved the electrical impulses in the brain from the emotional center to the cognitive and memory. So, someone's having a temper tantrum, and she would say to them, oh, did you take the bus today, or did your mom or dad bring you to school? Did you bring peanut butter and jelly for lunch, or did you bring, bologna for lunch? And you'd say, well, why would you ask that? Because when you get people concentrating on the how and the what, first of all, if you ask someone a what or a how or a question, it's about them, not about you. And it's making them concentrate on something different other than being made, which actually changes the electrical impulses in their head, which actually calms them down. So I learned it from a business perspective. She learned it from a clinical perspective. But it's the same technique. Why? Because people are people. Next. You're mad at somebody or someone's doing something. Everyone in your projects does exactly what you want them to do, right? You know, you tell them to do it, they say, I'm on it. It's always done perfect. Nobody's ever a slacker or anything along that line. So you have to have a conversation with them. This is a little bit like constructive feedback. For any of you who haven't studied it, it's a good thing for you to write down and do again. But this is a simple one. Say something that they like. Hey, I really like how you did this part of the project, but I'm a little concerned about this particular item. Can we talk about it a little bit? Can I suggest this? So by doing that, you know, by starting with something that they did well, they'll open it up. They're more likely to open up. If you just walk in and you say, well, I'm really concerned about that, you know, they'll immediately tighten up. They become defensive. What that happens, it's much more difficult to deal with them. Now, if you're the kind of project manager who says, how many people look at this and says, what a piece of junk that is. When people are good, I'm always telling them they're good. When they're bad, I just go in and tell them that they're bad. That's good communication. If you ever give someone a performance review and they're surprised that you liked them more or liked them less than they thought, then you didn't communicate with them properly during the time you were leading them, managing them. But this is great, you know, for someone you don't work with much, or just as a general technique. If I like to avoid conflict. I'm conflict averse. Why? Because I'm an only kid. So I didn't fight with my little brothers and sisters at home because I didn't have any. So I can do it. I mean, I can argue with the best of them, but it sort of sucks the life out of me. So when I'm going to use this, even if it's someone I've been working with and communicate for a long time, I like this one because it starts out on a positive note. Next one, when to say no. This goes together with this one, which is how to say no. But have you ever been in a conflicting situation because people just, you know, they just won't take no for an answer, and you know you should? I have found from a project management perspective that the second one, well, certainly if it's against company policy, you got a real good reason not to do it. But the second one, wanting to say yes just to get off the phone with the person. All right, yes, I'll do it. Anybody ever do that? And then you hang up the phone, and what are you thinking? Oh my God, now I got to do it. Right? Have you ever heard of scope creep? I'm sure it never happens in any of your stuff. Come on, will you do those 3 more reports for us? What do you want to say to the person who's funding your project? No. Hey, we picked 10, live with it. Right? It might work for the moment, but I would believe that would be a little career limiting. So, but there are times when you definitely should say no. The question is, how? I'll tell you a favorite one of mine, back to the 10 reports, is what I would say is you need 3 more reports. Those 10 reports, we have 10, but you need 3 more reports? Sure, just say yes. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If those 3 reports are important to you, they're important to me. So I'll tell you what. Here's the list of the 10 reports that we can fit into doing the project. Which 3 should we take off to put your 3 on? So what am I doing? I'm saying no through prioritization. Because he might say, yeah, you know what, these 3 are way more important than those other 3. In which case, what did that do to me? Assuming the reports all take about the same time to do. Am I doing more work? No. Unless I've already done those reports, but sort of take that, on faith. So I've made my stakeholder happy. I've said, no, I'm not going to do 3 more reports. Or he might say, nah, you know what, these 10 are more important. So I said, all right, then you know what, my favorite words. Those reports are important to you. They'll be highly prioritized in version 2. And if you're using, say, for example, sprint cycles, anybody can wait a couple of weeks for something like that. So you're just putting it off a little bit. If phase 2 is in the year 2040, then that's a little harder to do. Oh, there's a quote here I want to mention. Focusing is about saying no. is if all of your priorities are high and critical, then you have no prioritization. If you don't say no, then this happens. Because you know what? If you have 5 stakeholders, each one's going to have the most important thing to them. You need a process or a way to be able to prioritize those. If you do it yourself, if you can only do 3 of the 5, then by definition, 2 of your stakeholders are going to think that you have bad decision making. So how would you like to start a project with 2 of the 5 people having input into your performance review, not liking you from the outset? So what do? You say no by bringing the 5 of them together, saying, oh, you're all important to me, and let them make the decision. Whatever they come up with, whatever 3 reports of the 5, the 2 that don't will be upset, but guess what? They won't be upset at you. Now, one of the ways that you can cut conflict or help solve it is how many people have studied negotiation skills? You should. Or influence? I would also say that you should. Because these 2 together, some people say they don't like to negotiate because it causes conflict. It's funny, I'm getting an interesting reverb. Hello. Hello. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm picking on by the way, aren't the audio guys great? I mean, boy, they've been awesome to work with last night. What I do with some of those guys sometimes is what I'll do is and not really work every third. And then they go start looking at their stuff to see why it's not working, but I won't do that to these guys because they're great. But anyway, is compare needs and wants. All right, we're conflicted about something. Let's just say, all right, let's just put it on the table. I'll tell you why I need to do it this way. You tell me why you need to do it that way. And then what we'll do is we'll see if we can figure it out between us. But for you to really, as they say, put the cards on the table, you really need to have somewhat of a trusted relationship with that person in order to make that work. Next, discuss the problem, not the person. In other words, I can't believe you won't sign my document for me, tying back to Andy's example this morning. So what do? You don't make it me against you to get this signed. It's, hey, between the 2 of us, the CEO is going to be mad if we don't together get this project working. I got to do the work. You got to sign off on it. We're sort of in the same boat here and it's sinking. How can we work together to figure out a way to sign this, or we're both in trouble with Mary? All right, what you're doing is, you heard the expression, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You could literally be, like across the table from somebody. So you take the report, you go, and now you're sitting next to them, you're physically on the same side. I'm not making it me against you, I'm making it me and you against the issue. Because then if it's me and you, what is that? What's me and you? It's a team. If you're in a team, what does that invoke? Teamwork, it's in the word. Peer pressure. How many people want to let their team members down? Nobody. So if you can convert it to being part of the same team against the problem, you will get them on your side and get whatever the conflict is out of the way between you. Focus on interests, not positions. Remember that one that I had that it said that if people aren't against you, they're for themselves? Their position is, no, I won't sign it. Or I won't sign it. Their position is, their interest is, oh my God, if I sign this and it goes south, my name is on the document. So if that's their interest, how do you work this? Maybe what you do is you get the document signed off by 5 people instead of 1 because there's safety in numbers. It's more work for you, but if you can get everybody to agree with it, that's also an influence technique. Where if everybody agrees, it's one of actually Cialdini's 6 influence pieces or types. Then what this one is here is, we've talked about it a lot of different items. There's a small structure here that you should see. And then from here we'll just go into wrap up. And what that is that there's a process. First one, clarify the conflict. It's easy for 2 people to be fighting with each other over different topics. Oh, I thought you wanted Joe. No, I thought you wanted that. Oh, there's 2 people named Joe? You're fighting over 2 different people. Next, define a common goal. All right, how are we going to solve this together? Then you want to strategize on how to attain that goal together. And then you're going to say, hey, what are the barriers to our agreement? What's stopping us from making this work? From there, you want to agree on a resolution process. And once that's done, is document what each party says. Write it down. Because if you don't, there's what they call, deniability, or plausible deniability. I never said that. So send them an email. Hey, great meeting today. You could say, well, I don't trust you, so I'm sending you this email to document what we've said. Or you could say, you know what, was it such a great meeting, I'm so excited about it, being self-defacing. I wanted to make sure I understood it correctly. Email me back by Friday if this isn't what we agreed to. That's documented. And then ways to minimize future conflicts as they go forward. What I'd like to do is leave you with one last thought. This is for the cat and dog people in the room. Is what you want to do also is reduce future conflicts. The way that you do it is by building connections, or build connections with people. We've talked on that. Create trusted relationships. Ties back to what you heard this morning and what you'll be hearing later today. Think and ask ethically. If you take the high road, it's hard for people to disagree with you. Be transparent. You make a decision or you're mad at something with someone, don't let it stew. Once you bring it up, and talk about them, certainly using maybe some of the techniques we've talked about today, or others would be great for you to study on your own, but be transparent as to why things are done. And the last two that I'll emphasize to you is embracing teamwork, because if you're on the same team, it reduces the needed conflict. And lastly, is if you think about others and they know it, then they'll think about you. With that, I'd like to say thank you and turn it back to David.